Hello everyone. I hope everybody's doing okay. Today we are gonna learn about Seroquel or Quetiapine. Maybe you're new to this, or you've probably been prescribed and you want to learn how it works. Well, today I'm gonna teach you some information about what Seroquel is and how does it affect your body. Does it really work? What is the use? And I am not a licensed doctor, so I am not able to give any advice. I can teach you and give you that information. So let's get started. Today we have an AI. You can see the two beautiful images right here. We have two AIs because these images were made by AI. And we're going to have Podcast LM also giving you that information. And we're going to do a overview of what I think about and what is the truth, what I live with that medication because I take that medication. And yeah, I'll give you at the end of this video a rundown is should you take it or not? Should I continue to take it or not? Let's get into it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep into Quetiapine. You guys asked for it, so we're diving in.
Lots of interest in this one.
Yeah. So we're starting with its Wikipedia page, kind of the overview of what Quetiapine's all about, how it's used, some of the effects, a little bit of history.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. Get the basics.
Right, and then we'll see where it takes us. Whether you're thinking about taking this or just interested in how meds work in general, this one's got some interesting twists.
Definitely. Lots to unpack.
So, Quetiapine. It's classed as an atypical antipsychotic.
I feel like that term alone might scare some people off.
It does sound a bit intense.
Yeah. But it's mainly used for schizophrenia and bipolar, right?
Right. And atypical just means it works a bit differently than the older antipsychotics. Those are typical. Kind of a clunky term, but it's about how it affects the brain.
Oh, so it's not, like, inherently weirder or anything. No, it's more that atypicals, they tend to affect more than just dopamine, which is what the older ones focused on. So different side effects, too.
Gotcha. So it helps with both kinds of schizophrenia symptoms, right? The positive and negative ones.
Exactly. Positive symptoms, that's like the stuff that gets added to someone's experience. Hallucinations, delusions, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So the negative ones, then, that's more like stuff that's missing.
Yeah, more like things that are diminished.
Okay, guys. So what they're saying here is that an atypical medication for people that mainly is this medication was approved by the FDA for treating schizophrenia, borderline personality at best, but schizophrenia and delusional and stuff like that. Many people also experience with these medication sort of a motor retardness. For my end, I've been taking this for like 3-4 years, and I have noticed that in my speech, my memory, and the way I move, the way I am quick and stuff like that. Somebody like is really hyper, and I'm just very more slow after 3 years of taking this medication. So it's also like they're gonna say in the podcast, it's also to treat insomnia, and I'll let you listen to what they say, and I'll get right back. If you were prescribed this medication for insomnia, we'll talk about this.
Motivation, emotional expression, being social, stuff that's normally there but kind of gets dialed down.
So it's not just about like calming things down, but actually helping people get back to like a fuller range of experience.
Right. So it's a good fit for both sides of schizophrenia.
That's really interesting. And it's used for depression too, right?
Major depressive disorder, sometimes on its own, sometimes with other meds.
Wow. So this one drug, it's got its fingers in a lot of pies.
Now, that may not apply to you, but it does apply to me, and it does apply with a lot of people around me. Now, I don't want to sort of inspire you or, saying don't take it or not. It might be different for you. For me, I suffered from major depression. I could be 100% or 99% sure that this medication just got it worse. Now, if we go into the medicine, okay, into the science of this medication, This medication is to stabilize you, high dopamine. People that suffer from schizophrenia or delusional or whatever they have on that atypical spectrum, it's because it's oftenly because of a huge spike in dopamine in their brain. That's what the research have said. So if you're suffering from major depression, how in the world can this medication sort of get you feeling better? And the other hand, it sort of freezes you. It makes you numb. It numbs so you don't get the you don't hit the rock bottom, but you don't hit the high bottom, the high top. So this is actually a medication that really affected me. Well, it's still affecting me because I'm sort of taking it, slowing it down. But it affects sexual drive. Know that about it. Maybe not for you, but for me it does. And for many people that takes that medication around me, it does affect the sexual drive. So you have this, when you're going to, have your climax, you need to feel that high rush. You have like the adrenaline and you have the super hyper feeling to get aroused and. So that medication, what it does is it just pinches your high and lows, and it makes you sort of very, very numb, just on a straight line, right? So does it treat depression? Personally, for me, no. It made it worse. And yeah, so let's continue on watching this.
Yeah. And that brings up something important. Lots of drugs have what we call off-label uses, meaning doctors might prescribe them for stuff beyond what the FDA originally approved.
So like using a screwdriver to open a paint can. Not the intended use, but hey, if it works.
Exactly. With Quetiapine, it's used for Tourette's, some kinds of musical hallucinations, even anxiety sometimes.
Wow, that's quite a range. But I'd imagine there's some debate about how effective it is compared to other options, especially if it's used for so many things.
Oh, definitely. There was this big review back in 2013 by the Cochrane Group. They looked at tons of studies, 15 different antipsychotics.
So like a head-to-head competition.
Kind of, and Quetiapine landed somewhere in the middle, like standard effectiveness for schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Beat a few others, but not the top performers.
So not taking home the gold, but a solid contender.
Exactly. And it's always important to remember all these drugs, both the typical and atypical ones, they've got their own pros and cons. It's never one size fits all.
Right. It depends on the person, what works for them.
Okay.
Okay, so no drug talk is complete without the side effects. And Quetiapine, it seems to have a whole laundry list. Something anyone thinking about taking it should definitely be aware of.
Absolutely. Every medication, it's a balance,
Yeah.
Benefits and risks. With Quetiapine, some of the common ones are dry mouth, dizziness, drowsiness, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so pretty standard. Like, I've felt that from just cold medicine before. But there are also some more serious ones, right? Weight gain, blood pressure, cholesterol stuff.
You're right. Those are more concerning. And they're not super rare either. Quetiapine, it interacts with these receptors in the brain. Histamine, serotonin, they play a role in metabolism, appetite.
So that's where the weight gain comes in.
Could be, yeah. It's complex, but basically the drug's messing with these systems that control how your body handles food, energy.
It's like you take it for one thing,
Yep.
but then it sets off this chain reaction.
Right. And then on top of that, there are even rarer side effects, but they can be scarier.
This is where it gets kind of serious, right?
Yeah, prolonged QT interval.
For anyone who doesn't know, that's a heart rhythm issue, right?
Exactly. Can be dangerous. And in very rare cases, even sudden cardiac death. Seizures, too, sometimes. And then there's tardive dyskinesia. It's a movement disorder.
Well, I've heard of that. Isn't that usually with long-term use of antipsychotics?
Right.
All right, you guys heard it. So they say it's extremely rare. I experience all of them. Okay. I have high blood pressure since I'm taking this medication. And this is why I got this machine. I gotta take an eye on my blood pressure on a daily basis. I'm normal rhythm. I do have another machine I plug it on the tip of my finger, and I can see my heart uh, pulse. I do have also abnormal. So it's not all the time. When I start not to feel too well, I take that and I put it on my finger and see and make sure it doesn't go overdraft. If it goes over, like I go to the emergency room. They give me a pill and everything gets resolved. Also, for motor, so we talked about that. More slower, a lot lost in memory. Uh, a lot of headaches for me. So, and this medication, if you take diabetes, if you have diabetes and you take medication for that, or if you have a heart condition like cholesterols and or heart condition with other you're taking other medication, that medication is very unfit with the compatibility with the other medication. Your your doctor might still prescribe you those medication on a lower dose, but on a lower dose, that medication just slows you, so it makes you sleep. On a higher dose, it makes the opposite, and you will hear that in a moment. But just to let you know, yeah. So I do have all of them. It's crazy. Maybe it's not gonna be like that for you. I hope not. But yeah, I would say think twice before taking that medication.
Quetiapine's risk is lower than some others, but it's still a risk.
So it's definitely a mixed bag with this one. Like potential benefits, but some definite downsides to think about.
Absolutely. Weighing those benefits against the risks, that's key for any medication decision.
Well said. And speaking of weighing things, I know a lot of people are interested in quetiapine's use for insomnia. It's like this off-label thing that's become pretty common, but is it actually effective? And more importantly, is it safe? That's what we'll get into after the break.
So before we jump into insomnia and quetiapine, I I kind of want to go back to that whole atypical thing for a sec. You mentioned effectiveness for different conditions, and that's really tied to how this drug works in the brain.
Right, right. We touched on it earlier, but yeah, more details on how it messes with all those neurotransmitters would be good.
Totally. So remember dopamine, the reward chemical everyone's always talking about?
Yeah, I think we're all dopamine experts by now. Haha. But remind me how it fits in with antipsychotics.
Well, quetiapine, it doesn't just block dopamine receptors, it also interacts with a bunch of others. Serotonin, norepinephrine, histamine, acetylcholine, the whole gang's here.
Wow, so it's like multitasking in there. But how does that actually affect someone who's taking it? Like, what's the practical upshot?
Okay, so think of each of these neurotransmitters like a messenger, right? Carrying signals around the brain. And quetiapine is kind of like tweaking those messages, affecting how they're sent and received.
So it's not just like silencing the dopamine, but also changing how all these other brain systems are talking to each other.
Precisely. Which is probably why it can help with depression, anxiety, things beyond just psychosis.
Oh, that makes sense. But wouldn't that also mean more side effects? Like if it's messing with all these different systems?
Yeah, that's the trade-off. It's like, you get more effects, but also potentially more side effects.
Right, right. So with the drowsiness, for example, that's not just dopamine, but also...
Histamine's a big player there. It's involved in wakefulness, among other things. So yeah, quetiapine blocking histamine receptors, that can make you sleepy.
So it's like a domino effect. You block one thing, and it ripples out to all these other systems.
Exactly. And to make things even more fun, the dosage can change how it interacts with those receptors.
So how much you take really matters.
Big time.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to insomnia. Lots of doctors prescribe low-dose quetiapine for sleep problems, but it's a tricky area.
Yeah, we talked about that. Like, it's super common, but the evidence for it actually working is kind of weak. Makes me a little nervous, honestly.
I get that. It's one of those situations where clinical practice kind of got ahead of the research.
So doctors were prescribing it before we really knew if it was a good idea?
Sort of. And it's why talking to your doctor, being honest about what you're struggling with, that's so important. They can help you weigh the pros and cons, especially for off-label stuff.
Right, right.
All right, so guys, I'm like I said, I'm taking this medication for sleep issue, for insomnia. Does it look like it works? Nah. And so we have to understand the compound of this medication. And as you heard, it plays with a lot of stuff in your brain. It does promote adrenergic, uh, adrenergic cells, whatever you call it, and it does mute or sort of silence the awakeness gene, okay, or cells. Now, this medication, you're gonna hear in this video, it acts quick and it leaves out very quick. So it's not like a medication that would last long in your in your bloodstream. It will be there for a long time, but in your brain, the action is going to be short. The issue here is because it's so short, the adrenergic seems to take over. Okay? So while you're silenced and you're sleepy for maybe an hour or an hour and a half, that the taper of that medication, the first hour is gonna go up, and that will depend on your weight, on your height, on your health condition. But that medication in general goes up first hour, and then it peaks to maybe an hour and a half or two, and then crash. Okay, especially if you ate, like, I would say, like pizza or chips or any fatty food, that will affect, because it will take longer to get into your bloodstream to your brain. Be slower. So that medication acts quick. I would say within like 30 to 40 minutes. Then that next next hour or hour and a half, it will be in its full effect, and it will just zip right down. And your adrenergic. This is a medication doing this, by the way. The adrenergic will stay there, will stay at the top. That takes a longer curve to come down. You're gonna wake up in the middle of the night. If you don't wake up in the middle of the night, how? I don't remember the name of these cells, whatever you call it, that chemical in your brain that tells you, hey, it's time to sleep. That's called melatonin, but that's not what I'm talking about. Melatonin is one drug, but there's another drug that will make you stay asleep, and that will regulate your REM sleep, your REM, right? Like your I don't remember what are the stats. I think there's alpha, beta, and then you have another one. So that first one on top needs to be, I would say, 70% of your night, or 60 to 70%, and then you have to be in your theta and your beta, and then come back up, and it just goes like a wave. That's a normal night of sleep. If you have adrenergic coming on, you'll just stay in that REM sleep, okay? And you're not gonna recuperate. My experience with that medication is that I wake up and I'm feeling tired. It's like I haven't slept. Like I know I slept, but it feels like I haven't slept. My brain is not going the right way. My movement's not going the right way. I'm not acting the right way. I'm not acting myself. So if you're gonna take this for sleep, like I said, it might be different for you, but my experience is that medication, just as it does, excites the adrenaline or the adrenergic, so like the wakefulness side of thing, it doesn't really make sense to me why we should prescribe that for sleep.
Got to be a case-by-case thing.
Definitely. And to add to the confusion, there was a study, pretty recent one, 2022, looked at all sorts of insomnia treatments, found that quetiapine, even at low doses, it didn't really help sleep any more than a placebo.
Wait, seriously? So, like, taking a sugar pill would have the same effect?
Pretty much, yeah, at least in the short term. So it really raises questions about why it's so widely used for sleep.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. You'd think if something's being prescribed that often, it'd have, like, solid proof behind it.
You
So that podcast comes from a background where I feed it with knowledge about the medication, with the general use of people, uh, general opinion of people, the science behind it, and it concludes this. Okay, we say a lot of time AI might not be 100% right. I'm so far it exactly points to the right direction because all of this is what I have. Okay.
Would, right. But medicine, it's constantly evolving. What we know today might change tomorrow. And sometimes it takes a while for practice to catch up with the latest research.
It's a good reminder to stay informed, I guess, not just take things at face value.
Definitely. Ask questions, do your research. It's your health, you know? Okay, so shifting gears a bit, there's this other thing about creatine. I think it's super interesting. The article mentions something called fast dissociation. Basically, it's about how quickly it detaches from dopamine receptors.
Okay, now that sounds kind of cool. But why does that matter? I thought the whole point was to, like, BLOCK those receptors.
Right, but most antipsychotics, they bind to the receptors and hang out for a while. Quetiapine, it's more like in and out, super fast.
Huh. So it's like a hit and run on the dopamine system.
Kinda, yeah. And that's thought to be why it might have fewer of those movement side effects or hormonal problems compared to drugs that stick around longer.
Oh, so it gets the job done, but then gets out of there before causing too much trouble.
Exactly. Less collateral damage, you could say.
Clever. But couldn't that quick release also explain some of its other effects? Like maybe even the sleepiness?
That's a great point. It's possible. We're still figuring out all the pieces of the puzzle, but it does show how even small differences in how a drug interacts with the brain can have big effects on how it works overall.
The brain is such a mysterious thing. Makes you realize how much we still don't know about these meds and how they really work.
Absolutely. And quetiapine's a good example. It's relatively new, you know? Developed in the 80s, approved in the US in 97, so we're still learning about its quirks, even decades later.
Now, relatively new. I think it's pretty old. I'm not sure about what year I said is pretty new. 1997 to compare of today, we have gone a long way. So that medication ain't not new.
Wow, so it's still kind of like a new kid on the block in medication years.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Speaking of its development, you were curious about how it went from lab to pharmacy, right? The article mentioned the sustained release version, Seroquel XR, and hinted that it wasn't exactly smooth sailing getting it approved.
Right, right. I'm always fascinated by that stuff, like the whole behind the scenes of how a drug actually makes it to market. Sounds like a real maze.
Oh, it definitely is. The approval process, it's super strict, and for good reason. The FDA, they gotta be absolutely sure a drug's both safe and effective before letting anyone take it.
Right, can't just be handing out experimental cocktails. Haha. So what were the specific issues with Seroquel XR?
Well, one of the main things was proving it was actually better than the regular version.
So you have a Seroquel XR and a regular one. The XR does last longer in your body, but the pill is like twice as the size. And I think it's only available in 50 milligram and up. Yeah, so it does last longer. I'm not gonna lie. I did take XR, and boy oh boy, I was sleeping 16 hours, and those was not 16 hours of recuperative sleep. It was 16 hours. I was getting up and I was super tired. Now you must say, hey, the more you sleep, the more tired you are. Not that much. I was doing exercise. I was biking a lot, and you know, I was using my rollerblades and I was playing hockey and stuff like that. Nonetheless, 16 hours of pure, I would say like half asleep, because you do wake up a lot. Like I was waking up a lot during these 16 hours, but I felt so drowsy, so exhausted that I had to go back to sleep. And no matter how much hours of sleep I was getting, I was feeling as tired as I was the previous day. So that's what XR is extended release.
Like, did it really improve how people took their meds or reduce side effects? They had to do tons of studies to show that.
So it wasn't enough to just show it worked. They had to show it worked better than what was already out there.
Exactly. Higher bar to clear. And that's just one part of it, you know? drug development, it's this huge undertaking. Finding new molecules, testing them, figuring out the right dose, dealing with all the regulations.
Wow. Yeah. It's easy to forget all that goes into it. Like, we just see the pill in the bottle, but there's this whole story behind it.
Tons of work, tons of research, years of back and forth with the FDA. It's a whole process. But even when a drug, IS Haraco approved, that's not the end of the story, right? There's marketing, how it's presented to doctors, patients.
Right. And that's where things get a little more complicated, especially with off-label prescribing, like we were talking about, using a drug for something other than what it was originally intended for.
Exactly. And there's a fine line there between legitimate medical judgment and, let's say, pushing a drug for uses that haven't been fully vetted.
Yeah, and Quetiapine's had its share of controversy there, hasn't it? With AstraZeneca and how they marketed Seroquel.
There were allegations that they were promoting it for all sorts of off-label uses without enough evidence to back it up, basically putting profits ahead of patient safety.
That's not a good look. What happened with that? Did anything come of those allegations?
Oh, yeah. AstraZeneca ended up paying a massive fine to settle it all. It was a huge case, really brought to light some of the shady stuff that can go on in the pharmaceutical world.
It makes you wonder how often that happens, you know? Like how many drugs are being pushed for things they shouldn't be.
It's hard to say for sure, but that case definitely sparked some important conversations about ethics, regulation, transparency.
Right, right. At the end of the day, it's people's health we're talking about. That's got to come first.
Absolutely, no question. And speaking of the people taking this medication, their experiences are a big part of the picture too, right? Both the good and the bad. We can talk about all the science and regulations, but it's those personal stories that really bring it home.
That's a great point. Let's dig into that next. What are people actually saying about their experience with Quetiapine? How has it impacted their lives? It's easy to get lost in, all the data and the technical stuff, but real people are taking this medication and their experiences matter. The good and the bad.
Yeah, for sure. The human side of it, that's what really hits home. Like studies and trials, they give you numbers, but they don't always tell the whole story.
It's like you can read all the reviews you want, but until you actually try that new restaurant, you don't really know.
Exactly. And with medications, those experiences can be so different from person to person. Some folks, they find Quetiapine incredibly helpful. Like it lets them manage their symptoms, live a more stable life.
I can imagine for someone struggling with like severe schizophrenia or bipolar, finding a med that works must be incredible.
Oh, absolutely. Life-changing for some people. And those stories, those are important. But we also got to hear from the people who haven't had a good experience.
You're right, the ones who maybe had bad side effects or the drug just didn't work for them.
Exactly. Those stories are just as important because they give us a more complete picture.
I was reading some online forums where people were talking about their experiences with Quetiapine. Some are like, this drug saved my life, really positive. But others, they talked about feeling like zombies. No energy, no motivation, almost like they lost part of themselves.
It's a good reminder that one size does not fit all.
All right, guys. So they said it. A lot of people change their life. Yeah, I would assume if I was suffering from schizophrenia, I would have probably be like, hey, it's better that medication than the suffering that I'm living. So I do understand that part, but I'm not suffering from schizophrenia. I'm suffering from sleep disorder. So I don't understand why I was prescribed that. Nonetheless, I've been taking it for 3 years, and I can, for my part, and maybe it's gonna be different for you, but for my part, I feel like a zombie. So, and during the day too, I still feel like a zombie. It's just sort of taking over my life. Now, we're going to stop this right here, but I just want to talk about one last part. For me, I will gradually stop taking this medication. I've been prescribed Dayvigo. If you guys want to know and hear more about Dayvigo, will be in my next podcast. We will talk about it, how I feel with it. It's new to me, so I have to get on it and just to let you know how I feel with it. But Dayvigo actually acts differently in the brain, so it does sort of the opposite of Quetiapine. So what it does is it does sort of blocks the awakeness and the adrenergic or whatever chemical that makes your brain just, and it promotes the sleeping mechanism in your brain. So it makes your brain feel like, hey man, we gotta get to bed right now. This is the time, right? So all the endorphin, the balance of the dopamine, the serotonin, and it just sort of managed to sort of get. It's like a highway, right? It just manages the traffic and it just gets to the right point. Now you need to manage with the dose. You know, maybe the dose is not enough or it's too much. If it's too much, you can do the opposite. So yeah, so I'm gonna go through it, Dayvigo. That's gonna be my next medication. I'm gonna quit Quetiapine. I'm gonna let you know how I feel in 2 weeks without that medication. I did stop that medication for about a month, and I felt much better. The reason why I went back is because I was prescribed another medication, and that medication did not work. And what you say in that case? I'll take whatever there is. I need to sleep. Well, doesn't really make me sleep, but it could be different for you. Maybe for you, it's a whole different story. Maybe you're gonna sleep well and you're gonna feel rested. We all have different type of body and stuff like that. Different, I mean, chemical imbalance and balance. Yeah. So thanks guys for watching this video, guys. If you're taking Quetiapine, please put it down below in the comment. I want to hear you guys. I want you to hear you guys, and people want to hear from you because they want to understand if this works or not, and what's their experience, especially the experience, the most important part. So on that, peace out, ladies and gents. See you on the next one.
When it comes to meds.
Yeah.